Welcome to True Health Tuesday, and the truth will set you free. Okay, now last week we talked about the psychosis of diagnosis. No, okay, well I thought it was cool anyway. Okay, because think of this, if you know that multiple diseases, in fact, the 6 of the top chronic diseases, and in fact, most of the chronic illnesses that Americans are suffering from are idiopathic or lifestyle in origin. So that means there's not a pathogen attacking you. This is literally your body creating this. And it's wild when we're talking about the idiopathic diseases, because imagine if you took your car, smoking, ran like crap, no strength, no power. Okay, and the mechanic says, "I don't know what's wrong with it, but I know I can do a lot of therapies to it." Okay, that's exactly what the medical world is doing. So now let's look at genetics and epigenetics. And what's a trip is, and we're going to go over the whole history of this project, but I want you to know the latest stuff, because research in this is kind of fun. See, when the Human Genome Project started, and it was formed back in the 80s, it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. If we can identify the genes of the body, okay, because the body produces about 100,000 proteins. So at the time, they were thinking there must be like 100,000 genes. This is personalized medicine. This is to find that gene, so in a healthy person, we can find out the disease before it even starts. And then we can give medications to healthy people. Yes, it's going to be beautiful, you know? Okay, and now they're talking about, okay, that went kind of a bust. Okay, it turns out that human beings make about the same amount of genes as a mouse, you know, but now they're doing sequences on a whole bunch of people, trying to find this new sequence. And groundbreaking health benefits, personalized medicine, precision care. It's all another scam. So now let's look at this. The difference between genetic and genetic expression, we're going to go over that, but I want you to have an appreciation for your body actually adapting to the environment. Heart disease, obesity, diabetes, dementia, depression, cancer, autism. Are these genetic diseases? And you'll hear a lot in the news that there's a genetic predisposition to this. That is bullshit. It's like you're pre-diabetic, you're pre-dead, you're pre-arthritic, okay, you're pre-this. That means you're not there yet, okay? This isn't stage 0 cancer, okay? So let's change this a little bit. First, pat yourself on the back, because by God, you guys all made it. No, I mean you're the winning sperm. Bunch of guys tried to get into that egg. You folks did. Okay, so, but just look at this. Okay, so we got 2 cells. These cells join together. They form, and we're talking within 1 day, that sperm hits the egg, everything changes, so no more sperms can get in there. And within 4 days, you have this giant ball of cells. Now these cells, this little tiny group of cells, is going to differentiate into stem cells, but it's going to do a couple of different things in the meantime. So there's a massive amount of genetic information in here of history. Within 15 days, this mulberry ball flattens out into a trilaminar disc. It starts to form this primitive streak, and this streak is the beginning of the nervous system. So this is like day 15 after conception. Then you look at this, and the nervous system starts to form. Now, what's a trip is, we're talking 20 days. This is less than 3 weeks. The organs start to grow off of that nervous system. So from those 2 little tiny cells, you get a massive differentiation of cells. And it's all programmed into it. Now, we're just barely understanding it. This is like monkeys beating a Ferrari with a stick. At 5 weeks, you get the heart going, you get in. The organs grow off the nervous system like fruit on a tree. And then you get this. So how did all of this stuff come from 2 cells? And you've heard about stem cells, how stem cells are a trip. They can differentiate into a kidney cell, heart cell, brain cell, nerve cell, based on the environment that they're in, but also based on the pre-programming. Now, we don't know how they work. We just know if you put stem cells in an area that they start to change, okay, or give them. Now, I like this. The only difference between life and death is functioning intelligence. I got this from one of my mentors. And it's a trip because one of the old philosophers said people are confused. They think that eyes see, ears hear, stomachs digest. Dead people have the same, but it doesn't work. So there is a life force. Now, since we're talking about gene and gene expression and how to reverse disease, you live your life through the nervous system. Why do we say this? Because that's the first system that's developed. And your body, if you look at this automatic nervous system, you're going to adapt based on the physical, chemical, or emotional stressors you have. So you have a sympathetic nervous system called fight or flight, and that keeps you alive under stress. Instantly under this, and I could yell, I could stand on your foot, you could think about a traumatic event. So this is trauma, literally physical trauma, emotional trauma, chemical trauma, or your even thought patterns are going to initiate the sympathetic response. And that puts you in the fight or flight mode. So this shuts blood supply down to the gut. This causes the liver to break glycogen down to glucose. It elevates heart rate. It elevates cholesterol. It elevates all the stress hormones appropriately based on your perception of the environment and the environmental stimulus, okay? That's what your body does. Now, the parasympathetic is called the rest, digest, and repair. So blood is funneled from the arms and legs to the central core to initiate digestion, immune system function, and repair processes. So we need this system in balance, okay? If it is in balance, your body can adapt. So let's go on the BS behind genes, okay, of what you're going to hear from the doctors. Okay, it's really from multiple generations. Because figure if you're from Northern Europe and your family survived the Black Plague. Okay, I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Okay, so that means that every infection, every stimulus in your environment has added to this. You pass on these. You might say, well, what about sickle cell anemia? Isn't that a negative hereditary trait? Well, yeah, unless you live in a malaria-filled area, then you don't get malaria. Okay, you have major reductions in malaria if you have that sickle cell trait. So it really was an adaptive physiologic response. So hair color, eye color, skin color, these are all fantastic. Now, this is a lot of misconceptions of what people have on genes. You know, you're not a slave to your genes. You are a slave to the expression of those genes. So, and this is what the pharmaceutical industry wants you to believe, that every aspect of biology of an organism can be predicted from its genes. I've seen the gambling gene. I've seen the obesity gene. I've seen the sales gene. I mean, honest to goodness, you see these people and you're going, come on, really? Okay, so these are all not true. Single genes code for a specific anatomical or behavior feature. Yeah, right. Genes are a blueprint of an organism's form and behavior. Genes are uninterrupted sequences of DNA that only code for a single protein. None of these are true, but they're going to be advertised to you because we need personalized medicine. Why? Because the medicine now sucks and it's killing a lot of people. You know, we need personalized opioid prescriptions. So let's look at this. Okay, it started planned in '84, started in 1990, finished in 2003. And they thought that this would be a fantastic market. But it turns out that human beings have a little bit more genes than a mouse. Okay, so how can just so few genes produce so many proteins? Well, again, you got these guys, okay, in 2000, Randy Jirtle and Robert Waterland, okay, Duke University. They had these agouti mice, and they thought, okay, they're genetically designed to get sick. They're designed to get sick, chronic illness, obesity, and cancer. I mean, what a fantastic group. But they thought, wait a second, what if we gave these fat, sick mice and treated the mom with, I don't know, some type of methylation group, like beets and garlic and onions? What if we fed them that? Would that have an effect on the genetic expression or how the offspring was? And sure enough, they fed it to them and they thought, wait a second, not only did the mice not turn out to be, yellow, fat, and sick, They were good looking and brown. Okay, brown-like, okay, if you like brown. Okay, so and they found out, and they included these bizarre foods like onions, garlic, beets, okay, in the supplements given to the pregnant mice. And they thought, man, this is amazing. So in one generation, you can actually change that gene expression to where these mice weren't predisposed to disease and they were healthy by changing the diet of the mothers. And so think of this, your gene expression is everything. You can produce a gene that causes cancer. You can produce a gene that reverses cancer. You can produce a gene that causes any type of disease on the planet. And you can produce the same type of gene to reverse that process. So does that mean that disease expression and suppression is up to you? Pretty much, pretty much. So all those crazy philosophers that said, well, you're causing this. No, we didn't cause it. I didn't cause it. My parents were really bad to me, and this runs in my family. You know, everybody has bunions. I heard that today. No, everybody in my family had bunions. You know, that's why we all have to have operated on. Okay. You know, I really doubt if your great grandpa was able to run down people with bunions. Okay. You know, so what is that? You know, and I told this patient, I said, buddy, you got the same number of bones in your feet that I do. There's no weird, no, there's an extra bone. Yeah, I heard about that. You're probably better at dancing too. Okay, so none of this stuff makes sense. It's delusional. Now, I like this, Manlis Kellis. They said so what is it? What controls that gene expression? Now we are looking at epigenome, okay, the control above the genes. And they say there's over 150,000 or 150 billion gene sequences. That means that you have the gene, you can express it or suppress it. Even with 20,000 genes, you can do billions of sequences, billions, based on the amount of stimulus. So if I show you a picture of a wolf, you might think, wow, that's really cool, or wow, that's really dangerous. Instantly your body's going to be responding. And I love this, sponsored by GlaxoSmithKline, the Royal Society. Epigenetics, how the genome of living things is organized and managed. Mismanaged or disorganized epigenomes lead to disease. Mismanaged or disorganized. A misinterpretation by your body can kill you. A misinterpretation of a protein by your body can kill you. Okay, have you ever heard of, my God, there's someone allergic to peanuts on this plane, don't open up that. They can go into anaphylactic shock and die. I know it's tough because me and this guy grew up where you could go to the ballpark and what? Peanuts, popcorn? No problem, okay? Now, so why is that misinterpretation by an immune system from a peanut protein causing death? It's because we're again, that's an epigenome expression based on environmental stimulus. So wouldn't it be kind of cool to find out the source of what we're altering, why we're altering that genetic expression? Because this says mismanaged and disorganized epigenomes lead to disease. Hell, it can kill you. Now, let's look at the health of our population. Since we know that genes haven't really appreciably changed for 40,000 years, why has the gene expression changed into such a diseased population? When I was born in 1960, okay, 97% of the children were healthy. That means 3% were not. And we're looking, 94%, 88% in the 90s, 74% in 2006. Bam, a massive skyrocket after the 1990s, okay? 46% of the people in America, children under 18, are, I wouldn't say healthy, they just don't have a chronic illness or disease. That means 54% of our children, our species in America, have a chronic illness or disease. Now, it's also 60% of adults in America have a chronic illness or disease. Now, we know it's not genetic. It has to be genetic expression. Why? Because the genes haven't changed and we're getting sicker. Could glyphosate be a problem? Well, possibly. It's been sprayed on everything. If you're eating a non-organic grain, you're eating it. There's a natural antibiotic and a mineral chelator. If you don't have minerals, you can't utilize the vitamins, so you're going to be sick. If you eat this stuff, okay, and it's in the water supply of most of the communities, and if you actually look where the Mississippi River is, you've got this massive belt around there that's spraying this stuff on the corn, and you're looking at a huge swath of cancer, which is impossible. You can't have this area that's wiped out like if it was bombed, okay, and the massive cancer rates. And of course, they just lost a $2 billion lawsuit. And Dr. Huber, we pretty much sacrificed an entire generation of children. The longer we go on, the more damage is going to accumulate. Really, let's look at the Bt toxins. So it's not just the glyphosates that our population is exposed to that's causing this genetic expression of disease, because the body is responding correctly. If you take something that wipes out the gut bacteria, and you're supposed to have 30,000 different species in your gut, and this is 80% of your immune system, and this is the enteric brain. So this produces neurotransmitters. You're taking this stuff, you're damaging your immune system and your brain. How about, and I know this sounds like a great idea, how about we genetically modify a corn plant so that the pollen in it is a pesticide? Yeah, don't worry. The food and drug fraud and deception, that it's generally recognized as safe because it's still a plant, even though the pollen is a pesticide. It's only going to be fed to cows. Okay, turns out that when the cows eat it, it survives the digestion, then it gets cooked, okay, in the meat. Then it's fed to the mother, survives the mom's cooking process and digestion, then it gets into the umbilical cord and into the baby. Now this is a pesticide, okay? It's killing certain things. Anybody want to know the long-term genetic expression of this? Look around. This is our population. So again, autoimmune diseases. Now, because these are looking at expression of a genome, of a genome. Okay, we're all the same. Okay, we all are going to have similar responses to the environment. Infection, vaccines, are the other environmental triggers of autoimmunity. Now, vaccines, several reports temporarily followed by autoimmune diseases. Tetanus, diphtheria, polio, measles, and Guillain-Barré. Multiple sclerosis with HPV. And it's interesting because now 12-year-olds, the AMA is trying to get 12-year-olds to decide for themselves whether they want to get it. Okay, now there is no long-term study, and this is a product with absolutely no product liability if it's on the market. So now what kind of things can alter that gene expression? Okay, can vaccines do it? Absolutely, we've seen that. Okay, can poisons in the environment? Absolutely, we can see that. Now, does it alter multiple generations? Absolutely, you can see that. Okay, so when we look at this, before they passed the liability law, in fact, there was so much damage from the vaccines that in 1986 they passed a law absolving the vaccine companies of any liability. Why? Because of the profits were being cut into. So now your taxes pay for any damage from the vaccines, and the companies are free to do it. So with this amazing market, with no liability, and a shitload of government funding, so I mean, not government funding the industry, I mean the industry funding the government. Because if you want to get elected, you want the most powerful lobby in the world. Welcome to the pharmaceutical industry. So in the 80s, it went from 11 vaccines. Oh, by the way, back then, there was no mandatory. You had tons of outs. Then in the 90s, it went to 18 vaccines. Okay, and again, no liability, no one was forcing it. Each state had religious, personal beliefs and medical exemptions. Fantastic. And again, we didn't have that chronic disease state that we have now. In 2015, well, actually in 2010, they started to force vaccinate the medical professionals because honestly, are you going to buy something from a product that somebody isn't taking themselves? I don't think so. So let's force the doctors and nurses to get it, even though it doesn't help. And there's a lot of people going into the hospitals that aren't vaccinated. So I mean, there's no science behind this. So in 2015, 54 shots. Now, we're talking from 83 to 2015, we're a five-fold increase. Okay, with no liability. Okay, so then let's look at 2019. We have 72 doses of 17 different vaccines. By 2021, what do you think? Well, by 2020, we're supposed to have the adult mandatory vaccines. Okay, and so you will have to get them. So why? Are we altering the gene expression by putting these foreign proteins into the body? Absolutely we are. Because what causes gene expression? It's the environment, thought, toxins, perception, it's everything. So why is all of this going on? Well, let's look at the other factors, because what we're seeing is a massive assault on the immune system. And the body's trying to respond by inflammation, by elevations in blood pressure, by elevations in cholesterol. How many times have you heard you're pre-diabetic, you're pre-high blood pressure, you're almost high blood pressure, not just there yet. So by God, let's give you a drug to lower it. Okay, and we've done tons of videos on this because, you know, when somebody says, yeah, my doctor diagnosed me with high blood pressure, and I said, okay, well, what number are you looking for? And that's a pattern interrupt, because they'll go, well, what do you mean? I thought everyone was supposed to be 120/80. No, that was in Joint National Committee 6, that was 1994. They changed it in 2004 to everybody being 115/75. Then that lowered oxygen down to the brain so much that it caused so many strokes that they said, holy shit, okay, we're going to change this in 2014 to 150/90 for anyone over 60. And then the American College of Cardiology in 2017 said, whoa, we got no data to support any change on this, but we really feel that 130/80 is better. Okay, and what's the cause of high blood pressure? Idiopathic. What's the cause of high blood pressure? Idiopathic. What does that mean? They don't friggin' know. Okay, we don't know. It's just high. So you must take a drug to lower it. But let's look at other environmental stimulus or factors in autism, because by I think it's 2025 or 2030, depends on the stat you're looking for, 1 in 2 of our children will have autism. That means 96% of kids with that diagnosis will never work. That means if you're looking forward to having a retirement or Medicare, it ain't going to be there. Okay, so they're looking at pesticides, heavy metal, fragrances, adjuvants, and vaccines. Absolutely. And of course, we know that the HPV virus can actually cause infertility. That's why if you inject young children, particularly when they're 12, they're not going to know that they're even infertile for another 10 or 12 years. And they're not going to be at risk of the cancer, the cervical cancer, for 40 years, so you don't even know that it's even working or not working or causing this. But we do know that it can cause primary ovarian insufficiency. Now, again, this is an adaptation. We know that the schedule that they're doing, and I'm just talking about genetic and genetic expression. We know that it can affect a second generation. We know that. We know that the toxins can affect a second and third generation. And we know that this schedule, according to human and experimental toxicology, the schedule that our children are under has never been tested for safety or efficacy. Okay, it has been tested for liability. That's why they passed the law back in '86. So don't worry, if you have investments in the pharmaceutical industry, those are protected. If you have grandchildren, those are not. So, anyone get that sarcasm there? Yeah. Okay, good, just checking. Okay, so let's look at the CDC. Oh, okay, CDC. I mean, this is like God came down. Okay, 2 tablets, 10 commandments, and the CDC blessing. Okay, because that's literally how these guys are looked at. And they say that 6 out of 10 Americans have a chronic illness or disease. That is the sickest population, the sickest animal species on the planet. And these sons of bitches are responsible for that. Okay, and what do they say is wrong with you, being that you're Americans? Okay, well, not you, okay, but, or actually both of you. Yes, they're beautiful, tall, and strong. They're from other countries. Don't look at them. Just look down at the ground, okay? Heart disease, what's the most common cause? Hardening of the arteries, and also poor lifestyle factors, diet, exercise, overweight, smoking. So it turns out that what causes hardening of the arteries then? Well, toxic deficient food, lifestyle, and medications. So that's a genetic adaptation. That's not a disease. Let's look at cancer. Let's see what they say about genes and cancer. Genes you're born with, you can acquire, can cause cancer. However, if you inherit a genetic mutation that predisposes you to cancer, that doesn't mean you're certain to get cancer. So what does that mean? It doesn't matter about the genes, it matters about the expression. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, okay? And again, this isn't something you're genetically defective for, you're environmentally defective for. So it means a diet poor in antioxidants and damage to the lungs. Strokes, what's the most common cause of that? Hardening of the arteries. Holy shit. See this first one. Heart disease. So what causes hardening of the arteries? Toxic environmental factors. How about genetically modified high fructose corn syrup? The absolute #1 source of calories in America. What about all the other things like cholesterol lowering drugs? Damage the arteries and increase hardening of the arteries. So what's causing our arteries to be damaged? Is it the environment? Alzheimer's. Scientists believe many factors influence, including genetics. Really? Okay, lifestyle and environmental factors. That's the key. You're not going to pass on a gene that causes brain damage. Okay, you are going to pass on genes to adapt to a toxic environment unless that toxic overload is too much. Type 2 diabetes. Again, they're blaming genetics because what's the cause of type 2 diabetes? It's idiopathic, unless you actually look at the friggin' data and then you realize it's a poisoning. Then you look at chronic kidney disease. I'm sorry, C #1, okay, which is hardening of the arteries and poisoning of the body. So wait a second. We got 60% of our population sick with these categories of diseases that are idiopathic in origin, and they're not idiopathic only if you're an idiot looking at the data. Okay, they're lifestyle in origin. So does that mean that you can actually change your genetic expression based on the stimulus that you give yourself? Cancer is not a metabolic disease. Check out this book. Cancer is a metabolic disease. So what does he say that cancer is? Now this is affecting 1 in 2, 50% of us. Age? I doubt if it's age. But when you look at human dissection, 50% of everybody over 50 has cancerous tumors that have been walled off. 70% of everybody over 70, 80% of everybody over 80. We have it. Cancer is a natural part of our environment, and we can take care of it, wall it off, and eliminate it. If we have toxic lifestyle factors, the cancerous tumors can grow to where they negatively affect the body. Age, viral infections, hypoxia, environmental toxins, inflammation, radiation, and carcinogens. Absolutely. Now, what kind of drugs can actually alter the gene? That means alter your gene expression. Now, we talked about how you can produce a gene that causes cancer, you can produce a gene that reverses cancer. All medications. This means cholesterol, antidepressants, blood pressure drugs, methotrexate, that's a brilliant one, a failed chemotherapy drug. Anti-inflammatories, this means Advil, Motrin, and Aleve, anesthetics, contraceptives, antibiotics. I mean, virtually everything. Hey, does anyone have a Motrin in here? One of the doctors at our other clinic had a sore wrist, and she wanted to take it. And so I literally said, excuse me, why are you taking the Motrin? Well, her wrist hurts. And I said, okay, do you know that this destroys proteoglycan production, which is a building block of cartilage? She said, I didn't know that. And I said, do you know, so it's destroying your joint cartilage, do you know that it also damages the kidneys? No, I didn't know that. Okay, and this is a doctor, and I'm going, why would you possibly prescribe this or take this? Okay, and then we took a picture of her neck, and turned out she had a loss of curve in the neck, a muscle imbalance, and I said, hon, we can fix this. But we got to start respecting the body. Respecting the body? So why would you take these drugs? When I put up that list in the first part, is high cholesterol a pathology or an adaptation to stress? Adaptation to stress. Antidepressants. Since we know that serotonin is produced in the gut, we got an enteric brain in the gut. Is depression, and knowing that the frontal lobe on the brain is controlled by the cerebellum. Does that mean, and this is where depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, every kind of alteration in social interaction is, we know that toxins can affect it, we know that movement can affect it, and we know that serotonin is produced in the gut. So is depression really a disease, or is it an adaptation to a toxic gut and toxic movement and toxic frontal lobe? It is. Any idiot that says it's brain cancer, beautiful, show me the brain cancer, show me this, or brain chemistry, show me the brain chemistry alterations, because they say, just bad chemistry. And I've had kids come in and they say, yeah, my doctor told me it was brain chemistry. And did he give you any list of what it was, what chemistry was, what test did he do? Did he draw the brain chemistry on you? No, they're lying. Okay, so what type of things, by taking those drugs, do you develop intelligently based on the toxicity that you're exposed to? Heart disease, holy moly, this looks like the list from the CDC. Diabetes, leukemia, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. Consequences for modern medicine are profound. So just when apply their current understanding of pharmacology is an oversimplification. That's why it was kind of cool, because when you're doing research, I mean, okay, am I like the only nerd? Because I'm going, I found something, and this is really cool. Okay, so post-genomics, genomics and post-genomics. Okay, so this is looking at how the genetic and genetic expression testing has gone through. And it's wild to see how the discussion is here, how they have to change the view of Darwinian thoughts, and how it's not just an environmental adaptation, that it's actually expressing certain gene sequences based on the environment. I mean, this is really exciting stuff, but this is science. Science has never settled. Science is always a point of discussion. There's always going to be new advances. So when we look at this, toxicology and applied pharmacology, concepts of oxidative carbonyl stress, inflammation, epigenetics, and pathogenesis of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The current therapies for COPD are poorly effective, and the mainstays of pharmacotherapy are bronchodilators. So COPD, you give something that's a steroid that weakens the immune system, that forces the bronchus open, that will kill the patient eventually. Okay? Poorly effective. Yes, I'm in total agreement. How about we look at the body a little different? Traditional medicine needs a clear diagnosis that corresponds with a particular disease. Physicians may find themselves increasingly frustrated by their inability to understand and solve the problem. Exactly, because they're using inappropriate data. Okay, their whole philosophy, if you look at the body, has genetically predisposed to illness. That is stupid, and beyond unscientific. You are winners. You are the sperm baby that made it to that egg. You started off good. Okay, but then, based on the environmental stimulus of your mom, okay, you are expressing life. Based on the environmental stimulus that you are now exposed to. Trauma, toxins, thought, okay, an accident, and the interventions for your adaptation to stress. Do you know what an intervention to an adaptation to stress? How about an epidural? How about a surgery? How about a drug? How about blood pressure? How about metformin? Okay, how about lowering the blood glucose, okay, with a for a drug for type 2 diabetes? If you lower it 19%, you get a 43% increase in death. Let's talk about hypothyroidism, okay, which is what most people are coming in with. And they'll say, oh my gosh, yes, you do have a low functioning thyroid. And I go, okay, well, what's wrong? See, in reductionist thinking in science, what's the most important organ in the body? It's a rhetorical question. There isn't one. If you said heart, can the heart function without the gut? No. If you said the skin, can the skin function without the brain? No. So we're interdependent. But in science, you have to break it up into specialties, and that's not how the damn thing works. Okay? It's one unit. So you're not going to have the thyroid not function. okay, unless the adrenals are involved. And then you know the hypothalamus, which is the nervous system that controls the pituitary, that tells the thyroid to function. And then it could be nutrient deficiencies, or it could be a chronic stress, because under chronic stress, the thyroid is down. Let's look at the geniuses at Mayo Clinic. They say the cause of this is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Okay, great. What's the cause of Hashimoto's thyroiditis? It's unknown. Let's go over real. Okay, this is real. We do tests. This is a real, honest to good patient. Comes in, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and thyroid. Now, is this a stress state or is this a stress state? Now, is this an intelligent response or an intelligent response? I'm only going to give you two choices. Okay? It's an intelligent response based on stress. Okay? And this is giving me stress. Okay, so you look at this. This red on one side, red on the other, and the big green area in the middle is where they got to be. That's a balance of the autonomic nervous system. The left side of that is sympathetic, the right side's parasympathetic. So this person is in extreme sympathetic dominant state. If you are in a trench in the war, do you want elevations in blood pressure? Absolutely you do. You want blood supply to the gut to be decreased. Do you want that liver to break down glycogen and glucose so your blood sugar is elevated so that you can stay awake and protect your crew? Absolutely you do. Now, knowing that the thyroid and adrenals are in a harmonious relationship, that if you have cortisol being secreted, the thyroid is going to be suppressed. So this person is expressing three major symptoms of stress. And it could be physical stress, chemical stress, or emotional stress. Don't worry, she got a beta blocker, an ACE inhibitor, so she'd taken 2 blood pressure medications. She's taken some pain relievers because her joints started to hurt, metformin, but her blood sugar still wasn't being controlled, and she's taken Synthroid. Okay, and the first thing I say is make sure you don't take 2 of those together. And she looked at me, why? Because don't they work on different organs? I said, well, no, they don't. Okay, it's like the Doan's pills that are supposed to go to the back. No. You take any pill, it goes in your mouth, into your stomach, through your intestinal tract, into the liver. From the liver, it goes to the heart, then it goes to the lungs, back from the lungs, out into the heart, into the bloodstream, through the entire body. And this is the Motrin, Advil, Aleve, beta blocker, ACE inhibitor, diuretic. Oh my gosh, do you remember that article we just read about how these things cause epigenetic changes? What amazing. Okay, so what's the cause of high blood pressure according to the Mayo Clinic? Unknown. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with your car, but I got a lot of therapies for it. Okay, let's look at another stress response. Numbness in the hands. We know that the nerves in the neck supply the hands. Anxiety, fatigue. So could that be a chronic sympathetic dominant state? Could that be altered blood supply to the gut or altered stimulation to the cerebellum, which controls the frontal lobe? That's where I would look. I think that makes sense. How about high blood pressure? Holy moly. That sounds like a stress response. I got an idea. This person's under stress. They got blood pressure up to here because they're in a stress state. How about we give them a toxic chemical to lower that blood pressure and actually decrease oxygen to their brain or kind of give them more stress? Okay? Fix it. Look at the physical, chemical, and emotional stressors. So then we got, with a multitude of drugs prescribed to a single patient, adverse drug reactions are bound to occur. My God, I read a lot of journal articles, and this one made me stop. Truth. I don't see it that often. And I encourage you to look at this book. It's called Doctoring the Data. And this guy, very sarcastic Brit, every time he picks an article, what are they going to lie to me about on this one? Okay? And so I'm going, oh my gosh. Line 2, again, truth. One of the basic principles in treatment stated by Hippocrates is first do no harm. Stories of medical remedies causing more harm than good have been recorded since time immemorial. Again, makes sense. You don't know what's wrong with you. It's idiopathic. You're taking a drug that is altering your expression. This is the cause of how you're going to express your genes, physical, chemical, and emotional. Why? Because your body's going to respond the same way. And again, regardless of the etiology, all of the chronic illnesses that Americans are suffering from, 60% of Americans, 54% of our children, the etiology, it's regardless of the cause. It's going to be an adaptation of the autonomic nervous system. Why? That's the first system to develop, baby. You're talking 15 days. That sucker forms, all the organs go across it, and based on your perception of the environment, it's going to respond correctly. That's right, high blood pressure is a correct response based on the stimulus. Your body is always correct. And if you're ignorant enough to reduce that blood pressure with a drug and not look at the stressors, what happens? You get an epigenetic change that alters your health. How do we know that? Because at the University of Alabama, for every 1 blood pressure drug you take, your risk of stroke increases. You're in as much trouble by the time you're on 3 medications that achieve excellent control. You actually have great blood pressure if you're taking a shitload of medications. However, we want to raise the issue that despite great advances in pharmaceutical approach, relying solely on this approach is going to come at a dear price of people's lives. You have great blood pressure, but you did die. Okay, now you have much lower blood pressure. Can you see the psychotic? And what are they treating? What's the cause of high blood pressure? It's idiopathic. What do I have now? High blood pressure, but I know what this is from. Oh, what was the cause of the kidney damage, the heart problems, and the strokes? Atherosclerosis? We found a cause. Statins stimulate atherosclerosis and heart failure. Wow. I mean, you know, if this was on the CDC website, if they weren't on the pharmaceutical payroll, I would think that was cool. We propose that current statin treatment guidelines be critically reevaluated, like all science should be constantly, because it's always changing. When the science drifts away from the body being intelligent, we actually had a doctor in here once that said, excuse me, the body is not that intelligent. Wow, and you're in the people fixing business? You know, I mean, you know, I had to use one word, talk to him slow. I didn't use multisyllable words, you know, and you know, I got him to understand that it was great, but to be that stupid, it was amazing. He walked in here under his own power. Okay, so clinical cardiology. Decreased muscle function of the heart. That's bad. Okay, I know. Klingons in here, you got 2 hearts. Increased plaque. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Okay, when we're talking about the BT corn being eaten by a cow, prepared by the mother, eaten by the mother, and then all of this stuff is inside of a baby. Okay, we're affecting multiple generations. How about this kid? Now, 5 years old, ulcerative colitis and behavioral issues. That giant black area on the right-hand side of the screen is his stomach. That's him facing us. That's actually the left side of his body. But now, his mom, and I ask, you know, when we get a kid in here, and we get, you know, a third of our practice is under 12, the kid's got ulcerative colitis, okay, and what's the cause of it? Is this a pathology, or is it an adaptation to a toxic and deficient environment? So I said, Mom, were you given a flu shot? Were you given DPT shot? No, I wasn't. Okay, did they give you Pitocin and epidural? Yes, they did. Okay, now this is not done in Europe to the extent that we do it, but it's typically you give Pitocin in there, which is going to stimulate the uterine contractions and can cause damage. Okay, so since the mom had Pitocin, I know the kid probably had neck trauma. What's the sign of neck trauma? Ear infections. Because they're not ear infections, they're ear effusions. So what does that mean? He got antibiotics. So what does that do? Destroys the normal gut flora. So he's got physical trauma from the Pitocin, and then he's got the antibiotics, which is a poisonous mold, wiping out his gut flora. So now he doesn't have a real good recognition, because the body's got to recognize what bugs are pathology and what bugs are home. Okay, should you fight that peanut protein to the extent that it's going to shut off your lungs, or should you fight the E. coli? Okay, so you know it's important that you have healthy bacteria. Formula fed, why? Because the mom was given Pitocin and she couldn't release the milk, and fully vaccinated. By 5 years old, he's had around 36 to 42 vaccines, depends on how aggressive they were at 5 years old. Now, most of us that are older, they waited until you were 5 before they started to shoot you. So what's his genetic expression going to be like? But then wait a second. He lives. He's going to mate with someone similar. Okay, now they're going to have the Motrin, Advil, Aleve, the genetically modified high fructose corn syrup, completely altering their physiology. Now he's going to find somebody attractive that has had a similar history, and they're going to mate. So like the reverse of the agouti mice, you feed a mouse really healthy stuff, they have cool looking brown ones, okay? What's their offspring going to be like? So we're seeing multiple pregnancies that are aborted, early birth, low weight babies. What are we seeing? Have you heard of this? All the time. I mean, there's pediatric physical therapy clinics now. I mean, that's insane. So let's change this. Realize that genetic expression is in your right. Now that little kid can turn it around, just like the agouti mice did. You stop poisoning him, give him the appropriate stuff, deal with the physical, chemical, and emotional stress, and he'll be okay. Okay, but if you start looking at life completely different, okay, that your body is self-healing, self-regulating, that there is literally a life force inside, that you had the sperm and the egg come together, and we don't know how it forms into this multiple ball of cells. Then it flattens out into a trilaminar disc. Then it folds over and forms the notochord. Then all the organ tissues grow off of it and grow into these cells from those two. It's magical because we're at the infancy of understanding anatomy and physiology. So when we look at this, your health is dependent on your adaptive response. What do you need for that? You need nutrients, you need deep sleep, you need just normal. So fever, high blood pressure. Fever, can you imagine taking a drug like Tylenol to reduce a fever? Well, for one, it depletes glutathione, which blows up the blood-brain barrier, particularly in a kid. I mean, it's insane. It's toxic to the liver. And why do you want to harm the liver when you could cool a person off with a room temperature bath? Disease is an unhealthy adaptive response. This is from nutrition deficiency or toxicity. When we talk about thyroid, I know it sounds crazy, but what's the cause of hypothyroid according to the absolute experts? I know, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Thank you for remembering, okay? Now, smarty pants, what's the cause of Hashimoto's thyroiditis? It's unknown. Okay, there you go. Fine, thank you. How about we look at normal? Okay, what causes a crappy thyroid? Okay, estrogen, cortisol, liver toxicity, fluoride, pesticides, stress, toxic food, medications, and vaccines. What causes a good thyroid? Healthy gut, low cortisol, healthy food, healthy water, low stress. Good God, can you reverse thyroid issues by doing this? Yes. Let's look at some of the data. Okay, NFKB. Okay, now this is a factor that can be reversed. Now this is a factor found in virtually everything. You're talking AIDS, Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, heart attacks, atherosclerosis, everything. To reverse this, guess what you do? Fruits and vegetables. Oh wait, did you want more? No, this is how you express healthy genes. You do the shit that your grandparents did and you're okay. It's not you are what you eat. You are what your great-grandparents ate. And you are what your grandparents ate. You are what your parents ate. Okay, so you eat that. Granted, the great-grandparents were whacked out. They ate nothing but whole food organic. And they didn't take hardly any vaccines. Most of them took none. I mean, figure the smallpox only hit around 10% of the planet. That means 90% of us weren't toxified by it. Okay, fruits and vegetables. So does that mean that for healthy genetic expression, you put healthy nutrients in? Organic, plant-based, healthy fats, fermented food, vegetables. Had a patient, and this is kind of cool, horrible gut, and she said that when she took some fermented foods that she started to swell up and had a reaction. So I said, okay, are you used to eating fermented foods? No. But when I tried a bite of it, it tasted so good. Why? Because her body's smart, she knew what she wanted. She ate half of the container, okay? And I said, well, hon, I'm totally down with you, man. You know, I want to populate your gut too. But figure this, molds, funguses, yeast, viruses, this is a competitive environment. This is like, you know, Marlin Perkins' Wild Kingdom. And so when you put a whole bunch of new animals in there, it's going to create a negative response, or could create a negative response. So I said, look, slowly introduce it. Go buy, get a little kimchi, a little fermented, cabbage, some kombucha, a little gut shot, okay, and do a little bit each day. So you're adding it in there. You're building up an ecosystem, and it works. Can it be this simple? For genetic expression to reverse disease. Why the nervous system? Because that's the first system that forms. That's where you live your life through. And if your perception is a stress state, you're going to express those stress genes. This is the control above the genes. It's your perception of the environment, and you do it through the nervous system. Exercise. Multiple data points. You don't have to adjust 100 people a day, okay, but you do have to walk a half hour a day. If you're cursed with some gene, okay, and for cancer or obesity or brain damage, it turns out that walking a half hour a day can reverse that expression. I'm looking at every data point you can imagine. It can't be that easy. It is that easy. Proper nutrition, this means that man makes it, you don't eat it. Honest to goodness. Plant-based, organic, seasonal, sufficient rest. Fantastically good for you. This means you actually turn your genes on at nighttime, because that's when the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. The rest, digestion, and repair. Prayer and meditation. Do you know what your gene expression does when you start to pray? It's amazing. Okay, now November, we have an event that we're going to go over, not just this, but we're going to go over a lot of things. We're going to do it in the morning, 8 a.m. to 12, and then after that, hanging on the beach, we can break up into small groups. And if small groups want to go parasailing, that's pretty darn good. Okay, it's just a fun thing. I think we still have a few rooms left. The cruise is next year. That's going to be Athens, Cyprus. I think I'm going to be speaking in Jerusalem there, or Haifa. That'll be kind of fun. I've never been there. I mean, this is like really cool stuff. Come on, who wouldn't want to go? Am I the only one that just thinks that Israel and Athens and Crete is really cool? I mean, oh my God. Because Cretans, they're like really tough guys. They're just badass. I just want to hang out with them, have a beer. Okay, Extreme Health Academy. We did a podcast this past weekend that was really, really good. And we redid our drjohnbergman.com site. But think of this. If you go in there and you change your environment, you change your expression to that environment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I can take 3 questions. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Can we have any control over chemtrails?
Can we have any control over chemtrails? Not much. No. Not much.
And no one admits to it.
They do admit to it. Okay, if you're looking at the World Health Organization, there's a lot of data points out there that they're having a problem with sunlight decreasing corn production. We're looking at some pretty significant changes. What you can say the same question, not about chemtrails, but what about the economy? What about the economic downturn of the rest of the world? Okay, what about the environmental impacts of losing Arctic ice? Okay, what about all of this stuff, methane gas released? Okay, none of those events, okay, the world economy, the US economy is no longer buoyed up by the petroleum dollar. We haven't had gold reserves in 50 years. Okay, the economy, paper is just paper. Okay, there's going to be a big economic catastrophe too. Anything. Okay, you can't control the event, but you can control your response to it, and that radically controls the outcome.
Well, your response.
So your I am the only microphone. Thank you very much. So I got to repeat what you say, so it can't be a dialogue. So when you look at it, when you look at that response, that toxicity, how would you deal with the aluminum-bearing titanates that's coming down in the chemtrails? Gee, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, it's going to damage your tissue, so you have to have the antioxidants in there. Okay, fresh water, filter it. Okay, look at organic, wash your fruits and vegetables. Do the best you can. Okay, honest to God. Or move to Puerto Vallarta, you lucky bastard. He lives in Puerto Vallarta. Yes?
No chemtrails.
For a child with autism, what's the best thing, like a diet or something?
With a child with autism, what's the best thing to do? Okay, for sure, stop all vaccines. Know that it's a gut problem and a brain problem. And so you can get certain stimulus to the brain, but you got to get gluten-free, dairy-free immediately. You got to start introducing healthy gut bacteria, and these kids are hurting. Warm, moist cloth on their tummies because their tummies are just expanded like crazy. Their self-stimulating behavior is to generate dopamine because they're in such a stress state. The reason that they're banging their heads and going everything else, they have massive inflammation in the brain. When I get a autistic kid in here and we're getting at least 1 to 2 a week, which is just like mind-blowing because that's not our specialty. You can see, and you can see this on everybody that has one, the plates of the skull join in the middle. Right down the middle of this is called the sagittal suture. And that is like inflamed like you can't believe because the coverings, the meninges that surround the brain invaginate up through those openings. And that is brain inflammation. So hot baths to increase the inflammation, organic healthy diets, antioxidants, high dose vitamin C, just detox the heck out of them and get them to movement. You got to get them to a corrective chiropractor because when the chiropractor's got to adjust the skull, adjust the spine because any kind of movement can stimulate that cerebellum and that controls the frontal lobe and calms them down. Okay, does that make sense? Yes, sir.
In relationship to the autism, what is your thoughts on FMT, the fecal transplant?
Oh, on relationship to the autism, what's the relationship of fecal transplant? Fantastic. But the problem is they're in such a stress state, they're not going to have normal peristalsis. So the fecal transplant after you get them out of a somewhat stressed state is going to be ideal. Yeah, because you got to get that healthy gut bacteria, and these kids are super sensitive. They're not going to take fermented foods. You can kind of sneak it in there a little bit, but they're like beyond sensitive. Yeah, so any way to get that gut flora back up, you got to get them out of the physical, chemical, and emotional stress. You just got to stop them being poisoned, realize that they have heavy metal toxicity, particularly if you look at the aluminum studies, massive aluminum's in the brain. Okay, and that could be like an IV chelation, hyperbaric chamber, but you just got to get them on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, heal the gut. Fecal transplant would be a good idea. Okay, next week, more stuff. Let's change the world. God bless you.